we've got this nice, thick, nipple-proof sweatshirt on and the roll-tide hat.
Looks great, Brett.
I thought it did too. I was the proverbial horny teenager. Meanwhile, I'm like a little spider monkey in my bedroom. I like that. You squeeze it. The only thing I can say is, what the actual fuck?
He was a stay-at-home dad, and I didn't know that. He was on house arrest, and that's why he
And he wears this nice ankle monitor.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is my dad, and my friends look up at me and they go, Reese, that's a mugshot.
So, about her awkwardness, when we went up, she
About her
goes,
awkwardness?
I put together a brand new persona, which is what I'm now known as Hackah Jak. It was invented for my joining of Hackweiser.
Did I go number 2 first?
I usually number 2 first.
Yeah. So when she I was.
It's okay, I swear.
Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted criminal, now good guy. In today's world, criminals come in all shapes and sizes, but they all have one thing in common. They all have criminal thoughts. On today's episode, we're talking to Jesse and Reese Tuttle. Jesse was a hacker back in the early 2000s. He was arrested, goes to work for the FBI, and somewhere along the way, it comes off the rails. We're going to talk to Jesse today about that. We're going to talk to his daughter about that as well. Before we get to that point, let's check in with Brian, see what he's got for us.
Kayla Pollock, a 37-year-old from Ontario, developed paralysis from transverse myelitis after receiving a COVID-19 booster. Doctors confirm the vaccine connection and offer her MAID, which is medical assistance in dying.
Canada, Justin Trudeau, the man with the plan. COVID. Lady goes out, she has the Pfizer vaccine. She's more than happy to get it because, hey, she's trying to be a good citizen. Justin Trudeau gets on the news and says, hey, just get any booster just as long as you're protected. So she loads up, goes on down to get another booster. They don't have the Pfizer. They've got Moderna. She goes ahead and she takes that because evidently it's okay. Well, guess what? It was not okay. She gets transverse myelitis, which what that translates to, she becomes paralyzed for life. How did Canada react to that? Well, they offered to put her down, to euthanize her, not once, but twice. The only thing I can say is, what the actual fuck? I don't know what else to say about that. We know that COVID, from all sides of the political spectrum, was politicized. We know that. We know there was disinformation from all sides, all fronts. But when you've got a victim like this that gets this paralyzed from the booster, and then the government says, hey, the only thing we can do for you is we can go ahead and put you out of your misery. There's something horribly, horribly wrong with that. And we've got to, it seems to me that today, we as a people, more of us are sheep than anything else. We simply follow by whatever those talking heads on television or in government tend to say, and we never question it. Well, we've got to stop, think, reason, and think things through. Now, that does not mean I am anti-vaccine. I'm not. I've been vaccinated myself. But it does mean we just can't take everything for granted. Brian?
The Justice Department Inspector General last week urged the Bureau of Prisons to adopt stricter rules governing special housing unit rounds logs after lax policies potentially impaired the ability to prosecute the employees. OIG officials found that at least one inmate's death, 2 correctional officers had falsified records after failing to conduct mandatory rounds. The investigation itself came following a wider investigation into inmates' deaths in federal prisons. which found that a combination of understaffing and mismanagement contributed to the deaths of nearly 350 inmates between the 2014 and 2021 fiscal years, more than half of which were suicides.
So, as my viewers know, I have been incarcerated, federal prison, total of about 7.5 years. During that time, during my entire incarceration time, I saw 4 suicides. The first suicide that I saw was in a county jail. We were on 23-1 lockdown, which means you're in the cell 23 hours. 6x9 cell, 4 men in there. You're in that cell 23 hours a day. You get out for an hour. During that hour, you can, shave, you can use the microwave, walk around the interior of the pod, what have you. First suicide I saw, we were out during that 1 hour, and they've got, so it's a two-floor pod, cells around the outside perimeter, and in the center is you've got those metal picnic tables like you see on 48 Hours and stuff like that. This kid had been incarcerated, 6 weeks, something like that, and he was taking it hard. And this is one of the things about it. You see most people when they're incarcerated, they can accept that. They have it, there's a conditioning period, a length of time that it takes for you to get used to you being incarcerated. A couple of 3 days, if you're in solitary, maybe a week or a little bit longer to get used to that environment. Some people never get used to it. I've seen people that constantly scream. I've seen people that will bang their heads up against the wall. This kid was having a hard time of it. He needed a $600 bond. It's the only thing he needed. He had broken the window of a bicycle shop. So what does he do? That one night we were out during that 1 hour, he gets up, he walks upstairs. Now there's a guard in the pod with us. He walks upstairs, steps over top of the banister, jumps, lands, bam! We thought the son of a bitch was dead. Cop's sitting there in shock, just like, we think he's dead. Kid starts to move. Kid gets up. This time the guard, he's got his finger on the button so he can press it and get help, but he's not pressing the button because he's in shock. He's got his finger on the button. Kid gets up, starts to walk back upstairs. At this point, you can hear the guard start to say, no, 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 but he's not pressing the button. Kid walks back upstairs, steps across the banister again, jumps, lands on his head, and he doesn't get up. That's the first person I saw commit suicide. I saw two hangings. What they're talking about in this article is they're talking about how guards are not doing their jobs. And the BOP is notorious for that. The suicides that I saw did not have to happen. I saw 2 people murdered. That did not have to happen. What happens is the guards are supposed to pull rounds every so often, okay? And in some facilities, there's a button that they press to make sure, like at the corners, to make sure that guard goes past that. What this article's talking about is these guards not doing their jobs properly. And the article goes on to say that, hey, since they falsified the logs, it's going to be very difficult for us to prosecute these guards because they were not doing the right damn thing. So their lies is what's protected them from being brought to justice. I mentioned that, and I know there may be a lot of people out there who have not been incarcerated before. And you may think, hey, hell, the son of a bitches, they deserve it. They were out there victimizing people. I cannot argue that they were not out there victimizing people. I did that myself. But I will tell you that you will know a society by how they treat those who are incarcerated. We've got to do better as a people. We have got to do better as a people. Okay, so one thing I noticed the other day, I'm a big Reddit user. And I've got a Nintendo Switch, I've got the Xbox, I've got the PS5. Shit, I've got the Steam Deck that I've not played in a while. I've probably got, 2,500 games plus, something like that. I keep buying the games, never have time to play them. Anyway, I've got maybe 350 Nintendo Switch games. Don't tell anyone else that because I don't want anyone to know in the house what I spend on my video games. Anyway, happened to see this article for this Nintendo Switch MIG cartridge. So in my former days, As a criminal, I was also a bit of a pirate. Those who have seen me speak know about this. I started to sell pirated games, then software, then installing mod chips on the gaming system so you could play the pirated games. I've pirated movies. I did all this bullshit. Video game-wise, the first real pirated device that I had was for the Nintendo 64. It was this big contraption that actually plugged into the cartridge slot on top of the Nintendo 64, and it recorded pirated video games onto a zip drive that you could load the data onto. And it was fantastic. You saved a shitload. It was like $600, out of pocket. But once you paid that, you never had to buy another video game. Welcome to today's world with the Nintendo Switch. Yes, this is the last year of the Nintendo Switch, but Nintendo Switch has thousands and thousands of different software titles. That's how they make their money. That's how hardware makers do it. Like Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, what they do is they put the machine out at a very low cost. They're not making a lot of money per machine. They make money on software. Software is expensive. A lot of people don't want to spend the money on software. If you can get something that, hey, I don't have to buy the money, I can pirate the games and play on that device, guess what? That's exactly what you'll do. And this is exactly what we're talking about with the Nintendo Switch MIG cartridge. What that is, it's a little cartridge that plugs into the cartridge slot. You've got an SD card on top of that, and you load it up with any number of games that you want to, free of charge. What does that equate to? That equates to Nintendo being really pissed off. Now, this device came out this month. Sells for anywhere from $69. I've seen it on eBay up to $129. It works like a charm. I am not advocating piracy, but if you're looking at consoles, video games, things like that, there's always a demographic of people that look to gain access to the software without having to pay for it. They're always trying to jailbreak things. They're always doing homebrew things. And this is exactly what we're talking about now. This is to me, this is the be-all, end-all of piracy on the Nintendo Switch. I would imagine that the manufacturers of this will get shut down within the next 6 months, but for that 6 month space, they're going to put out thousands of these things, and Nintendo is going to have one hell of a headache trying to fight it. As people know, I am really big about doing the TikTok bit. And here's the funny thing. The more I TikTok, the less I get of things that jiggle. And we know that I initially liked the TikTok because I would, it would feed me this content, and some of the content would jiggle a little bit, and I'd be like, yeah, I like that. And I'd stop just a second, and then it would start feeding me more content that would jiggle, and I would like that. Well, come to find out, the more that I view my TikTok, that algorithm actually senses that, hey, Brady likes more things than just jiggling. So it's been feeding me Jordan Peterson. It's been feeding me all these little, tidbits of things. One of the things that has been feeding me that I thought was really interesting was this clip from Charlie Kirk, and it's going to be talking about today's criminal insight. So,
why was Hitler wrong?
Why was Hitler wrong? I mean, you can write a whole essay about that.
Well, tell me one sentence as to why Hitler was objectively wrong.
To me, I mean, to himself, he was right.
Of course he was. So there's something above you and above Hitler that we're comparing right to. What is that something?
Morality.
Where do we get that from?
How you come up, where you're from, your parents, your culture, I mean, the place you live. I mean, a lot of different
So
things.
Are some moralities better or right, more right than wrong than other moralities?
I would say no, because it just comes down to you personally.
Okay, so the Taliban believes it's okay to rape 8-year-old boys called T-boys. Are they wrong?
To me, yes, they are wrong, but to themselves, they think it's right.
Is there... Are they objectively wrong?
Okay, what is an objective? What is the objective?
Well, hold on. Objectively, looking outside...
According to what?
Right and wrong.
That comes down to me. And to me, they're wrong. But to them, they're right.
Wow.
So first thing out of the gate, college kid has no idea what the definition of objective is. We cannot have situational morality. And there's a reason why. Now, my moral compass, I want to be honest with you guys. My moral compass is much more fluid than your all's moral compass. My moral compass does not point north nearly as much as your all's. No, my moral compass is very situational. My moral compass tends to say that, hey, if I can benefit by something, I'll tend to swing my morality that way. Why does it do that? Because I am a criminal. That's why criminals are very good about playing upon and preying upon situational ethics. We have to start to understand that some things are wrong regardless of what society or culture that you belong to. Period. It's wrong to victimize people. All right. It's wrong for you to profit at the detriment of others, or for you to receive pleasure at the detriment of others. This kid is talking out of his ass. Charlie Kirk, and here's the thing, I'm not a huge Charlie Kirk fan. I'm not. I've never sat down and watched him speak before or anything else like that. I've seen a few clips. I'm not a huge fan, but the dude's right, man. You can't sit there and say that you don't have a higher truth out there someplace that we all try to approach or attain. That's the basis of most philosophy that's out there, from Aristotle to Socrates to Plato. They looked for that higher truth all the time because, by God, it's there. And that being said, on today's episode of Criminal Thoughts, and before we start, you may notice that I've had a bit of a wardrobe change. Let's call it a wardrobe malfunction. That's right. I was sitting here. I took a sip of my tasty beverage and a nipple popped out. So I figured I'd better change clothing pretty quickly. Now we've got this nice, thick, nipple-proof sweatshirt on and the roll-tide hat.
Looks great, Brett.
I thought it did too. Now, that being said, today's guests, plural, we have Jesse and Reese Tuttle. Jesse Tuttle, back in the day, was known as Hackah Jak. He's responsible for countless high-profile breaches. Talking about Girl Scouts of America, talking about Jenny Craig, because who doesn't want to breach Jenny Craig? Talking about several different financial organizations as well. Also, Jesse's laughing in the background right now. So let's just go ahead and get started with this shit today. Jesse, Reese, thank you so much for coming on Criminal Thoughts.
What's up, Brett? Thank you for having us on.
Thank you for having us.
I'm sorry. I'm wired today. I've got my monster half finished. I'm going strong.
Clothes are flying off. It's crazy over here.
I know. Nipples galore.
You know the most disappointing thing I found out about breaching Girl Scouts of America? They
weren't made out of real Girl Scouts?
No, that too. They don't bake their own cookies. They outsource it.
See, I knew some bullshit like that was going on. How much are they right now? They're like $8-10 a box, some bullshit like that. You can get the same thing. Like, I like those little, not the fudge rounds, or the ones with the fudge and the coconut, and they're really tasty.
Those are my favorite, the Samoas. Which, by the way, I buy them by the case, I freeze them, and then I have them in like July, middle of the summer, because you can only buy them this time of year.
You freeze them.
They're good.
Yeah, dude.
I've really not tried a frozen Samoa before.
Have you ever frozen a Reese cup?
Oh, okay.
Yes, I eat frozen Reese cups. I eat frozen chocolate chip cookies. Love the shit out of those. Obviously, we're going to spend most of the entire episode talking about frozen cookies and treats. Let's not do that. The shit you learn, exactly. It's talking about cyber criminals here, and we're talking about frozen cookies. There we go. Why the hell not?
And almond juice.
Okay.
And almond juice. I got that from, I forgot his name. He used to be on The Daily Show. And I was watching a stand-up routine of his, and he was talking about the how people drink almond milk. And man was going, he was going just fucking haywire right there. And he was like, no, I like moo cow fuck milk. So I was like, since that point, I've always remembered that it's almond juice, not almond milk. You squeeze it and get the juice out of it.
What do you do, Brett?
You squeeze it. So for those who don't know, this is our second attempt at recording. Bretty, in his infinite wisdom, is trying to set up a network area storage device to run movies throughout the entire house. I decided to update my router. Honestly, the router update sucks.
Nothing pirated.
It's still a little choppy, but it's workable, though.
It's workable, he says. Thank you so much, Brian. I'm so glad that it's workable.
Well, we sure none of it's pirated.
You can hear each other, so that's good.
No, pirated content. No, I don't know where I got that copy of Song of the South, but it's a damn nice copy, I'll tell you that. We tried to record the other day with Jesse. My connection was absolute dog shit. So we're back today. And Jesse and Reese were kind enough to come in. Jesse told me that he was very nervous the other day, and my response was, "Why are you nervous? There's nothing to be nervous about." Are you still nervous, Jesse?
You know what? Nah. I mean, it was 30 years ago this year. I got into, the dial-up BBS scene, news groups, IRC. Got into wars and HPAV stuff, and I mean, I kept it a secret, like my friends knew. And then 20 years ago, I got arrested and my life went to shit. So yeah, I was absolutely terrified when we started to record the other day.
Well, when you do get arrested, one's life does tend to go to shit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Let's be honest. So, let me ask you, and we're going to get into the arrest, and that's one hell of a story. How did you get started in computers? That
dates back. I mean, I'm like 9 years old. My grandfather's an engineer at GE Aircraft Engines. He had an Apple II Plus that was totally pimped out for its time. And this was like circa 1989-ish, 1990. He was getting a new computer. He knew that I was interested in it. My mom loved when we'd go over his place. She'd sit and play on it. I'd play on it. We'd make greeting cards, whatever else. And because he had tools like that. So he gifted it to us. So we got a modem where we could dial out to stuff. We got massive stacks of books that, I mean, I wasn't much of an avid reader until that point. I thought it was so cool that, I could take this computer that, I mean, it to me, it was just a screen and keyboard. Let's see what we could do. And the very first thing I remember actually accomplishing on it was copying the code from a book to make a poker game. And that was I mean, I remember that took for flipping ever, but it was the coolest thing because I grew up, my grandmother owned bars. I knew how to play poker as a very young child. And that was the coolest thing for me was I could sit there and play with the computer instead of, finding someone to play with.
Right. So, yeah. So do you still play poker?
Yes, sometimes.
he looks over at Reese like, is it okay for me to answer? So Reese, how did you, because you told me before we started record today, you told me you just came from a hackathon. So how did you come to, is it because of your dad that you're into computers like you are or what?
It's a fun little story. A lot of it happened because when I was younger, I spent a ton of time with this guy. And I like to say he was a stay-at-home dad, and I didn't know that. He was on house arrest, and that's why he was a stay-at-home dad. So.
What's your dad do for a living? He's a stay-at-home dad. He wears this nice ankle monitor. He cooks me breakfast every morning.
Yeah.
Before he checks in with a probation officer.
I remember when it got cut off, and then later that day, she goes, "Dad, where's that thing on your ankle?" She never seen me without it her entire life.
Yeah, so he was a stay-at-home dad. The story behind that, and then I was like super into a lot of tech stuff. Little did I know that's because he kind of was like, "That's what I know, so that's what I'm gonna help you know." And I was like, "Cool." So I started doing a bunch of like Microsoft camps and things of that sort, and playing a lot of Minecraft.
Hold on about the Microsoft camps. So she's like 5-6 years old, and I'm enrolling her in Microsoft camps that's designed for like teenagers.
Okay.
Like the age group is like 12 to 16.
All right.
And they're like game dev camps. And like 2010, 2011.
Early days. Well, for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Early days.
Early days.
Back when I was a kid, I love that.
Back when the PC was an abacus. That's what we had. Shit, yeah.
Shit, yeah.
So let me ask you, I'm guessing that I'm guessing that show and tell at school was really fun. I would like to bring my dad in. Dad, tell him what you did. Well, I got
she
Oh my
learns about
gosh.
my history
In
on
a
the
really
bus.
great way. You get to
On
hear
the
about
bus.
how I learned about him.
So
Okay,
my
no, I gotta hear first. Okay, no, you said it. I gotta hear. How did you learn about his history on the bus?
So he had
that was a rough day.
Yeah. So I was in, I want to say about second or third grade. No, it was about third grade. And my friends were looking up each other's parents on the bus.
As kids do with smartphones.
Right. And so we were going around, and it was like a couple of my friends, and we were using my phone as the designated phone to look up the parents. So we're looking up ourselves, our parents, and then somebody's like, Reese, look up your parents. And so I was like, I look at my mom, a couple things pops up because she's a professional graphics designer. And then I look at my dad, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I click on the images, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is my dad. And my friends look up at me, and they go, Reese, that's a mugshot. I was like, I didn't even know what a mugshot was.
No, it's not.
And so I go, I look back down and I go, oh, that's not my dad. I didn't know. I mistook that for my dad.
You're sitting there looking. Oh yeah, I thought that was my father. No, it doesn't look anything like him.
No,
Yeah,
nothing,
no,
no
it was
resemblance,
and
actually.
they all just looked at me like, okay.
Liar.
Okay. And so I went home later that day, and we were in the car, and I go, so something interesting happened today. He's like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, well, I was on the bus, and we were looking up our parents, and I could hear him go, oh.
I pulled the car over. I had to park.
He did pull the car over on the side of the road, and I go, this picture popped up, and they said it was a mugshot. I told them it wasn't you, but that was you.
That's you, Dad.
And he goes, Reese, there's something I need to tell you.
That's when we had the talk.
That's when you knew your daughter found out how to use Google properly.
Yeah. That was a rough day.
Yeah.
All right, so hey, all joking aside on that, my youngest, Carson, I got out of prison in 2011. I don't have kids of my own. I got two stepsons, and my youngest, Carson, Brendan, a couple 3 years after I met his mom told me, she didn't want the kids to know who I was. So one night she tells me it's okay to tell Brendan. So I took my Kindle into his bedroom, pulled up Kingpin by Kevin Poulsen, pointed the title to him. He's like, yeah. Then I found my name and what I did with it, and I pointed to him, and he's like, oh, shit, and then reads the book the rest of the night. Carson, and then he comes back out, a couple of days later, and he's like, that shit is so cool. And I'm like, no, it's not. But Carson didn't know who I was, and he was
same thing.
Yeah, he was significantly younger. What happens is I break the law again. I recidivate. I was carting food and Christmas presents and stuff like that, and got caught. And at that point is when Carson finds out that his, I wasn't married to Michelle at that point, but his soon-to-be stepdad was a criminal. And for me, that was an extremely hard pill to swallow, seeing that in a child's face, that disappointment, that shock, surprise, anger, sadness, just a slew of different emotions there. And I'm wondering, Reese, we were joking about it just a second ago, but what were you thinking? What were you feeling when you found out this?
That's a really good question, because the early stages of the story, I hear like there was a lot of not necessarily theft, but he was making sure that he would be set for life if worse was to happen. And there was times where I was sitting there like, all those people, I feel kind of, what I'm saying? Like I felt bad for like the systems that got hacked and things of that sort. However, there was a sense of also anger, not because necessarily with him, but more of the sense of the injustice of a lot of what happened, and then the fact that it never got talked about. That's what irked me the most. And so I was like, so we're just sitting on this and there's nothing being done and you can't talk about it. And it was all this stuff. And that's honestly, I think the most emotional part of it for me was the fact that it never got talked about.
Right.
And I felt like it was an injustice.
You know, that conversation happened probably about 10 years ago right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the last 10 years, she has really wanted me to come out and talk about my situation, talk to people. I've been very adamant on not doing it.
Right.
But I do remember, like, she was embarrassed that, you know, the whole first picture that came up was a mugshot.
Yeah.
And she
been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah. She was concerned with, you know, how other people at school might view this. And,
Right.
you know, because the depth of my charges, I have 16 felonies. And we'll get into all of them, but, you know, 6 of them are for an unauthorized use of government property. 10 is for pandering a sexually oriented matter involving a minor.
Right.
And, you know, it was, even though all that was related to my work with the FBI, you know, securing government military systems, taking down human trafficking networks, you don't see that when you do the Google searches at that time.
There's no
you
context.
see mugshot,
Yeah.
convicted, you know, a hacker, pedophile, whatever the case may be, and there's no real context to it. And so I remember, I mean, that was the whole reason I spent the last 10 years of my life literally burying my past, because I had come to the conclusion I'll never talk about it.
No,
It'll never come up. And now that, you know, it's
Yeah.
I do remember that day though.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, and you know, Reese was saying how she was feeling, what she was thinking. When your daughter tells you that in the car, hey, Dad, found your fucking mugshot on Google.
Yeah.
What's going through your head at that point? Because I mean, you pulled the car off like, okay, it's time for the talk.
Yeah, no, we literally pulled to the side of the road, parked, and we talked right there in the car. It wasn't like, hey, let's talk about it tonight. It was, this is happening now. A crisis, let's address it head on and as truthful and transparent as possible.
Okay.
And so we sat in the car and talked about it.
Well, and I also think I was very young, but I was really good at comprehending really advanced things. So it wasn't like super sugarcoated. Now, some parts of it, obviously, like there was still like especially like the details of a lot of what he got into, but
right.
I
could grasp a lot of it.
My wife, her mom was there, her aunt was there. They were in the car as well. So it was the 4 of us, and Amber was with me. You know, for the last 2 years of my hacking career, all the way up.
Now, who is Amber?
My mom.
Her mom.
Okay.
My wife. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I actually met her because my involvement with the FBI. They came, knocked on my door, took my equipment, and then they actually said, you should probably meet some other people than just your hacking friends.
Right.
I went on Yahoo Chat, found my now wife, because of that. But, you know, we're sitting in the car, and so Amber was there through the entire thing. She witnessed it all go down, and she's kind of that person that, like, it doesn't matter the consequence, she won't lie.
Well, it's good.
When I met her, we almost didn't date. When I met her, I said, how would you react if you found, like, someone you know or someone you meet is a wanted criminal or a wanted hacker? She goes, well, hackers are criminals. I'll report it to the police. I'll call them right now. Like, that's her mindset. Like,
that would have been, for me, that would have been the line in the sand right there. Okay, so can't see you anymore.
Done deal. But it's, so when we're sitting in the car, like, I'm actually sugarcoating it a little bit, and Amber's the very matter of factual one. She's like, Reese, here's the facts, here's the details, like pop, pop, pop.
Right.
And they start talking about it, and I'm just like, thank God she's in the car, because I mean, I was having a hard time dealing with it, because I knew one day I would have to talk to my daughter about this. Man, I did not want it to be when she was like 8, 9 years old.
Oh yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, that's a tough conversation for to have with anyone, especially your child at a very early age like that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get back to the story. I just
No.
other things, a lot of memories flying in.
Let me ask you. This is something that we were approaching on our first attempt at recording.
Yeah,
you had mentioned you grew up around barroom environments, around poker, things like that. And one of the things I'm curious about with not only myself but a lot of the former criminals and even current criminals that I get to talk to is what determines that kind of fluid moral compass that people like me have. Was your upbringing a strong moral upbringing, or was it more situational type ethics? And could you talk about that a little bit?
I think that in some aspects I did. My parents worked hard to give me manners, give me a moral compass, to the best of their ability. But I really did grow up with the situational compass.
Okay.
Now I wouldn't say it was always situational. There was never a doubt in the back of my mind of reasoning and logic behind something. Like when I was actively hacking, anything from government, military systems, banks, universities, schools, everything else. It wasn't typically financially motivated. It was curiosity. And I was always an avid learner. And so my justification is I'm in the pursuit of knowledge. I'm in the pursuit of wanting to learn and know and understand things even better. And, my parents, my grandmother owned bars. My mom worked in them. My mom and dad actually met in a bar. My dad was helping deliver a new cooler.
Okay.
My dad and mom got together. My dad's brother, which was significantly older than him, was I think the oldest of like 6 boys or second oldest. My dad was the second youngest. There was like 15 years difference between their age. My dad's brother ended up with my grandmother and they got married.
Okay.
And so, I spent a lot of time, and that wasn't my grandfather that worked for GE. That was my uncle Papaw.
I got you. Hey, I'm from Kentucky. I know what Uncle Papaw, cousin, father is. I know all that stuff. We good.
Hey, a lot of my family's from Corbin.
There you go. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's Blue Bloods for real.
Oh boy, it's gonna get deep today. But I mean, something would break in the bar, and my mom and dad would be like, "Oh, let's go over and like take it apart and try and fix it."
Right.
And that was just their nature. And my mom was really inspired by her dad because he was an engineer. He had degrees in physics, chemistry, electrical engineering, structural engineering, and like 1 or 2 more degrees. Like
right.
I was brilliant. And so she was really inspired by him, really loved to take things apart. And I remember as a kid, like we sat and took apart a telephone, one of those like old, like touch tone, like ring, the bell inside.
Right.
And to show me how it worked. And like literally the 4 wires that go to it, she explained how those work, that 2's not really used, these 2, this, that it was all about learning how it works. And so in my head, that fluid aspect came in as my desire to learn how it works and explore it. I could use that to basically justify anything. And I did.
I get it. And
like,
so I understand the curiosity. I've got 2 questions on that. So on the curiosity, and certainly I get it. But if you were just doing breaches for curiosity's sake, how were you profiting at the same time? Did you have a job on the side, or what were you doing?
So I started in 1994, I was 14. I was a high school freshman. And so I get into the hacking, freaking kind of environment. Got into phone phreaking, which is hacking phone systems, because I'm dialing up to BBSs. And then sometimes people don't want to talk, and I would go to a payphone and, I would use a blue box or whatever, and I get some free phone calls. And I found telephone poles that had line terminations on them. Back in the day, you could find some telephone poles where the lineman would pull up and there'd just be 2 screws. They clip the alligator clips on and call out. Well, I had my own handset from Cincinnati Bell that a lineman actually gave me. It was his old one. And so I would just pull up not pull up, I'd walk lots of times or get a ride to telephone poles to make phone calls using my handset.
Do you want to know what the extent of my phone freaking history was?
What?
And this is the first time I have ever said it. So as a teenager, I was the proverbial horny teenager. All right.
As one teenage boy is.
Yes. So what I would do is I would get the extremely long, the phone cable, 150 feet of phone line. I would go to the neighbor's house on their outside box where it plugs in. I would simply unplug their phone line, plug my phone line in, get back in my bedroom, and call 1-900 phone sex numbers.
Look, because guess what? And she's talked about this before. One of the things that makes us a good dynamic is we understand how each other think. And I'm the bad guy. She really is the good guy. She was literally raised like, be honest. So much of her mom in her. So she's like, man, I always love learning how these bad people work.
That was it. And what prompted that, no kidding, what prompted that was I had dialed the numbers out of the house. The parents had gotten the phone bill for several $100s, knew what it was, got angry at me. And I was like, well, we got to fix that because I can't stop dialing and smiling. So we've got to fix that problem.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, it was the neighbors that were having their phones disconnected for not being able to pay that phone sex bill.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm like a little spider monkey in my bedroom.
Yes. My parents were no stranger to $1,000 phone bills in the 90s.
Exactly. that was me. That's this idiot right here.
So I get, I'm 14. I'm getting into hacking and freaking and wars and software pirating and, the wonderful quality of 1993, 94 JPEGs of like, Baywatch stars, whatever. Yeah. And that's, I didn't have need for money. I was a 14-year-old boy, but then looking at my parents and my mom and dad were the kind, not only did they rip things apart, I remember as a little boy, my dad would have cars lined up down the road. He'd get off work, come home and start changing people's brakes and oil for money.
Okay.
My mom she's absolutely gifted with numbers and, mathematics just mentally. Right. And so she would help people with their taxes on the side. She would help people with their books on the side, like just brilliant with math and numbers. And so they were always, outside of work, on the weekends, they were always doing extra stuff for money. And I seen that. And when my friend introduced me to, the quality of the mid and early 90s nudie pics and pirated software, the first thing I had was like, dude, there's other people in school that would want these.
Right.
So I started downloading. That's what really got me into wars and pirating software is downloading them, putting them on floppy disk, and selling a copy of the disk. I'm literally selling bootleg disc in school. People's buying it. This leads into, everything to like even downloading like AOL program,
right,
where people on AOL would like denial of service attack each other. I would literally download those tools, put them on floppy disk, and sell those too.
All right, so let me break for a second so I can explain to the audience, because I get people that they were not around when you and I were around. So back in the day, we didn't have BitTorrent and all these torrents that are out there, all right? And we didn't have a lot of storage on hard drives. So what you would do is say you found a game, Duke Nukem, Postal, something like that. You would go to a website and they would have it uploaded to a server. And here's Jesse showing you some 3.5 floppies that held, I think, 1. All right, so they held what, 1.44 megabytes worth of data, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So what you would do, say the file, the game was, say, 30 megabytes, which is not big when you consider Call of Duty is over 100 gigabytes for an install these days. But back then, Duke Nukem, 20, 30 megabytes tops. All right. Yep. So you'd press on that file. You would have to save it to those types of disks that Jesse just showed you on screen, all right? So you would pop in one disk into your floppy drive. It would write 1.44 megabytes worth of information. Then a little message would pop up saying insert disk 2. And you would keep doing that until you got to insert disk 30. So you'd take your stack of fucking disks and then you'd try to install it on your machine. And hopefully it was written correctly and you would get the entire thing installed over the space of, an hour and a half. It was called spanning disks, by the way. These days you've got gigs and terabytes worth of data and you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You got BitTorrent. So it's fine. Piracy these days is great. You were the entrepreneurial guy. You decided to take your Duke Nukems and whatever software that anybody in
3D and Doom
and Doom, can't forget that. Unreal Tournament, all that.
And where I made a boatload of money was from Doom, and it wasn't distributing Doom because I actually went to a pretty wealthy school that most of the parents was very, upper income. I wasn't, but their families were, and here was the cool thing. We went to an electronics show. I've never even said this before. We went to an electronics show and I bought some disc from a guy there, just a single disc.
I bought some disc from a guy. I knew a guy.
And it was a mod for Doom where you could replace the aliens with Energizer bunnies.
Of course you could.
Yeah, why not?
Who doesn't want to kill that fucking rabbit?
So, and then another mod was replacing them with the Kool-Aid guy. So I bought those two discs.
Don't you hate
Little Jim Jones?
I do. When I was little, I hated the Kool-Aid guy. I always sat around and thought I'd be so angry if he bust through my wall, especially in the winter. I used to think about that as a kid.
These days, I'm not a kid. I'm a kid at heart. So these days, I think about a home invasion of some unfortunate would-be criminal busting in and that 12-gauge Remington 870 just waiting for them. That's my Kool-Aid man of today.
Yep. Part of what got me into reverse software engineering was those two floppy disks because I took the Energizer Bunny one, and when I was learning how to crack software, I figured out how to modify the graphics that was in the DLL of it.
And you gave that rabbit boobs.
In there. There was a picture I had from the school, a digital picture of our school principal, and I put the principal in there, and I distributed that, and it was like $20 for the disc if you wanted it.
That shit today would get you locked up.
I did not know that.
You talked about curiosity. The story about Doom's outstanding, but there was also a degree, from what I was reading yesterday about you, there was a degree of an ideological motivation for some of this stuff because you targeted Middle Eastern servers at one point, right?
Oh yeah, that's I will get to that because that comes down the line a number of years later, and that was a very vigilante hacktivist stage of my life. But so in '94 I get into software distribution pirating. '95 I start learning how to crack software, and because I was cracking software, the registration codes and things like that, I started finding some bugs and things in it. Well, then I started learning how to take and craft those into exploits.
Okay.
And a lot of the first things that I worked diligently on for months was things like Microsoft IIS web server.
Right. And
a lot of the various FTP software that was out in the mid 90s. And because I realized, so I started when I was working on, I think it was a Windows 95 registration problem that the group was having. And I was just kind of like trailing along, learning, helping on this. I found a situation in Windows 95 that I was pretty confident was a backdoor put in by the vendor.
Okay.
Could be wrong. I don't know. But when I shared it in the group, they quickly said, this is not the place for that. We're not hacking. We're software pirating wars, blah, blah, blah. And then someone messaged me, and we were on IRC, and said, hey, I know some people that would be interested in what you found. So invited me to some other channels, some other servers. And I really got excited about the idea of like finding these backdoors that vendors may put in or other bugs, and then how to take those bugs and actually turn them into workable exploits. So I spent almost all of 1996 doing that.
Okay.
I was so passionate in 96 about like doing it. It was the coolest thing to me because I love to rip things apart and see how you put them together.
Right.
So I remember sitting in the IRC chat when the Department of Justice website, very famous hack, happened. I was sitting in the chat room while people's talking about it, and they're prepping it. They're getting it ready. They're putting together the HTML for it.
Right.
You know, all this stuff. So then moving forward, 97, 98, very similar. When I get to 1999, I wanted to hang out with a different group of people. I wanted to expand. And there were some people I met that were into into website defacing. And I wanted to hang out with them, but it was kind of like that, you know, you got to be one of us to hang with us.
Right.
And it kept coming back. And this was like over the course of a year, because it really started in like 98. And I was like, no, I'm not into that. That's not. And so then I was like, you know what? I do want to just hang with these people. They have some exploits that they've been using that I don't know. They keep contacting me for exploits I've been generating and writing. So I was like, okay, fine. And I hit a couple sites. I defaced them.
Okay.
This was before I was Hackah Jak. It's a
Now this was strictly to just be able to join that group, or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I get my way into the group, and I'm like, aha. So I pretty much, I only defaced a couple sites at that time. And so in 2000, I'm hanging with them. I get to know a guy named Pantera, P for NTRA. And he started a group, I think it was called Fear the Beer. And then the next group like that, it changed the name, morphed into Hackwiser.
Okay.
And a play on Budweiser. And
Right.
so I was showing off, you know, with a handful of people one night, and he was there, and he messages me. He goes, dude, your collection of exploits is just insane. I've never seen anything like this. And so I sent him a couple 0 days that I had. I shared with him some other things. And he goes, I would like you to join Hackwiser as, you know, one of our Windows exploitation specialists. He didn't call it that, but, you know, in modern terms, that's what it would be called. So I end up joining the group. I contemplate on it, and I put together a brand new persona, which is what I'm now known as, Hackah Jak.
Okay.
Before that, I never used the name. I mean, it was invented for my joining of Hackwiser.
What was your name prior to that?
Uh-huh.
It was a lot.
I've never released that.
Okay.
The only time that's ever been released is when the FBI found out, because you know, they had a program called 5 Rs.
Right.
And you sign an agreement, anything disclosed. They called it King for the Day. It was
Right.
King for 2 weeks. That's when they found out and was able to put it together.
Okay.
But maybe one day in my life, on my deathbed, I'll release that. But
Okay.
I joined Hackwiser, and you know, I start helping in very high profile, prolific hacks. It was to boost the group's reputation.
Now when you say hacks, are you breaching, or are you just defacing websites at this point?
Yeah, defacement.
Okay.
So, and some of them are, you know, everything from like, we alluded to it earlier, Girl Scouts, Jenny Craig,
Sure.
some bank systems, some high tech, some tech companies, government, military, all sorts of stuff.
Was there
And then-
was there a common theme for the targets that you would seek out, or was it just any website that happened to have a vulnerability at that point?
So, yes, on both ends. So, I would help a lot of the other members when they were hacking something. A lot of my hacks were typically more targeted, because I had the collection of 0 days that even, fully patched systems, I could just still nail down, no problem.
Okay.
Which was an absolute rarity in the community. Most hacks happen from unpatched systems, human error, and configuration problems.
Right.
And I'll even get into some of that here in a minute. But for me, it was sharing. So I helped. I was part of the group to hack some high-profile sites to bolster the group's reputation through defacements. But then also I started sharing my. I started writing exploits and scanners and automation tools for the group to automate their hack processes, to automate log destruction, to literally some of the first ever in the hacker industry, full automation.
Okay.
There is a defacement up that actually shows where I had a bot in IRC, and I literally told the bot, go hack the site, and it used a 0 day and fully automated, hacked it, destroyed the logging, everything, and then returned to me, here you go, what's next?
Okay. Now,
So-
were you charging for this bot or not?
No.
Okay.
So, everything, I never, other than the software, I never made money. I did actually have some financial accounts because I knew that one day, because the level in which I was going to, I may have to go on the run.
Right.
Like, I come to terms with that, and I knew that I would have to have money. So, in 2001, while I was with Hackwiser, the U.S. had a spy plane, a Navy spy plane, flying off the coast of China in international airspace over international water, and a Chinese fighter jet took it down, landed in the South China Sea, and there was this whole big chaos and eruption that happened over it in media. And being, a young kid, I was pretty patriotic. I was, and I wanted my voice to be heard in this. So I started, as the New York Times dubbed it, it was the first U.S. cyber war that the U.S., people from the U.S. entered into. Right. It was the very first U.S. cyber war. It was against China. And later, not much later, New York Times dubbed it as the first cyber world war. So me, Pantera, and a couple others started that, led the charge. I took the role to interview with the South China Morning Post to give them updates on like, hey, here, this is, our stance. This is what's going on. Basically like a Chinese cyber army came up on the other side. In the middle of this is when I got the first knock on the door. FBI comes right in the middle of Project China.
Okay.
And says, hey, I knew they were coming though, because at the same time,
there's a story behind
there is a separate story behind that. They didn't come because of Project China.
Mm-mm.
They didn't come for that reason. They actually came because of an intrusion into multiple banking systems.
Okay.
And
I read about that.
Yes. So that's running right along right along Project China. So Project China is going on, and the FBI knocks on the door and says, hey, you hacked some financial systems. I knew they were coming because, I went through a whole login process of anytime I would log into one of the financial systems, it's like any hacker, you're going to go through your proxies, VPN, Tor, whatever you would use now.
Sure.
I went through my whole process. And because I knew one day I may have to run, I logged in and I looked over at my timer and I remember looking at it going, oh my God. That was a very sobering moment. And it said 32 seconds when I hit that kill switch. And that kill switch.
You didn't do all your steps.
I didn't do all my steps.
Okay.
I knew without a doubt. I set off alarms. I set off trips.
So let me ask you, Jesse, and I want to talk about the financial institution breaches.
Yep.
You've said a couple of times now that you realized. First of all, when was Reese born?
After this, so 2005.
2005. All right.
Yeah.
So prior to this, you've said a couple of times that you realized that at some point you may need to go on the run.
Yeah.
How were you preparing for that potential run?
It's funny because at that time, all I planned out was the money aspect. I never actually planned out the identity. I've learned some things listening to your shows of how I should have been planning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I had a solid 8 digits saved.
Okay, and I'm assuming that solid 8 digits was not from legal activities.
Not at all.
All right. That's what I want. It
was literally, and it wasn't just breaching someone's accounts, like phishing them and breaching their accounts.
Right.
I hacked banks, and would sell off their databases.
Okay. You see,
I had the back-end system level admin access.
This is what's really interesting to me. I know a few of the founders of Anonymous, all right, and some of those guys were ideological throughout, but most of those guys would start out as an ideological type motivation, and then they realized somewhere along the way that they needed to eat while they were attacking these systems.
Yeah.
And they would typically go over to credit card fraud, bank breaches, things like that. You on the run, and when you kept saying that, I kept saying, if he's going on the run, you that takes a lot of money to do that. So it's not surprising that you would venture off into financial breaches. Is this what the FBI was knocking on the door about?
It was.
Yeah.
So there was one. They literally came. As a matter of fact, they said, "Do you know why we're here?" And I said, "Bank of Wall Street." And they said, "No, but thank you for helping us figure that one out now."
Okay.
It's for, and I signed an agreement with the bank to not come after me. So, but yeah, I knew they were coming, and it was, I didn't have it planned out. I was a very ideological person. I had a lot of curiosity. And this was my fallback because I still lived with my parents. I didn't have much need for money. So,
how old were you at this point?
21.
Okay, 21. 2 agents show up at the door. You answer the door, or mom and dad answer the door?
Oh, no, not 2 agents.
How many?
So I was my room.
Is this the
embarrassing?
What people talked about?
Yeah. So have you ever heard that story? Like, Hacker probably has a room in his parents' basement, living there hacking. That was me. I had a room in my parents' basement, and 20, 30 computers surrounding the walls, computer books everywhere. And my mom knocks, says, "Hey, Jesse." I said, "Hold on," and she says, "Can you come out here for a minute?" Wasn't uncommon. I mean, carry up laundry, whatever. So I'm like, okay, fine. And I start to spin around my chair and stand up. And when I said, "Yeah, give me just a second," I heard another voice says, "No, open now or we take off the door."
Okay, so did they have a warrant at this point?
They did.
Okay.
And my mom invited them in. They had a warrant. And I opened the door, and the special agent from Cincinnati, Benny Bustamante, became he was later my handler, a great guy. Came in. Agents from New York and Cincinnati both came in. Many agents was in my house. I don't even know how many people were there. They had Suburbans outside.
They have the helicopter.
I don't know if the helicopter was there at that time.
Oh, okay.
I think so. But I mean, it was a very low intense situation. I mean, it was very chillaxed. Wait, do people still say that?
Yes.
Okay.
You do.
I did. and I mean, like, they were so easygoing, and the agents from New York, where the financial institution was, they were really high strung. They seemed like really bitter, like maybe they're playing good cop, bad cop.
Right.
I don't know, but the Cincinnati agent, Benny, was like, dude, he would literally look at him and be like, stop. You're not doing that in my jurisdiction. And I didn't understand the dynamic of what was going on at that moment. They took all my computer equipment, all my books, took everything,
right,
as one does in a seizure. They took it downtown, and they're like, hey, we'll be back for you tomorrow. Be ready to go bright and early. That confused me.
So what was on the search warrant? What were they looking for on the systems?
I don't even know.
Okay.
I don't even know if I honestly ever read that search warrant.
All right.
Really?
Yeah.
Because,
but I wasn't worried at the same time because there was almost nothing. I mean, I knew 2 weeks ago I made a boo-boo, 32 seconds, and when I hit kill switch, that was a kill switch that was designed to destroy my systems in the event that there's a knock on my door that quick kill my systems. Okay. So all my systems were all fresh hard drives, fresh installs. I mean, my previous drives were destroyed and gone by that point.
Okay. And so you had 8 digits saved up at this point?
Yes.
Where?
Within that financial system. Yeah.
Agents didn't crawl up your ass on pulling bank accounts?
So the next day they come pick me up. We take a trip to downtown Cincinnati to the federal building where their office was at the time. Love the fact that we actually stopped, picked up donuts and coffee.
I like donuts too.
Yeah.
I remember.
And we know Reese likes coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, you can say that.
So we go downtown and they have all my equipment still like in the crates they hauled it down there in. I mean, they could have unpacked it, packed it back up. It looks like they never did. It was all just sitting there along a wall.
Okay.
And they said, hey, we want to ask you some questions. Will you submit to a polygraph?
Okay.
And I said, sure. Well, they're like wiring me up. I've never done a polygraph before. And I looked at him and I said, so, I'm a hacker. I'm not a liar. I will tell you what I did. And he goes, really? He goes, shut up right now because we can't have you talking without a lawyer in here.
Sure they can. You're an adult.
Right.
So it served me well. Right. So they had just appointed me a federal public defender named Ransom Hudson. And he comes in and he goes, Jesse, you're really willing to talk. And I said, well, I'll talk about my experience and what I've done.
Okay.
And he goes, so how far are you willing to talk? Are you willing to snitch and do other things? I said, well, that can't happen because I don't know who anyone is. I said, I made a big effort in the community, no one to ever know who I am. And part of that is I would never know who anyone else is. I said, but I will tell them what I've hacked. I'll tell them the systems I've done. He goes, I may have an idea for you. So he leaves, he goes and talks to the agents. The Cincinnati agent was really interested. The New York agent was kind of ticked off about it, but they come back and they said, hey, we have what's called a 5R agreement. I don't know what those 5 R's were, but they don't even have that anymore. They've replaced it with something else. But They said, basically think of it as king for the day, where anything you disclose, we can never hold against you. I said, okay. They said, but if you don't disclose everything and we use that and we find something else, we could use that against you. So it's in your best interest to disclose anything and everything you've ever done. I said, all right. So they actually let me set up my computer, and I accessed them online archives of where I did keep backups and stuff.
Right.
And that's where I became king for 2 weeks. I disclosed every system I've ever hacked to them. And he was like, dude, you realize you probably just helped us close more than 1,000 case files.
Okay.
And that's where they said, okay, what we would like to do is hire you to hack government and military systems, just as you have been, because you get intel and intelligence from the hacker community to the levels and depths that we don't have any insider penetration into. So you know of vulnerable systems, people talk to you about it, but you independently write a lot of code, you write a lot of 0 days. We'll pay you up to $1,000 for every government and military system you hack.
What year is this?
2001.
2001. Prior to 9/11 or after?
Before. It was May of 2001.
Okay.
Which actually leads.
Really, like, that's a really odd lead up to that too.
Yeah. So what happens is this was May. It was right as Project China was going on. They actually returned all my equipment to me. When I left that first day, I took all my equipment home.
Okay.
And then I proceeded to go in for the next 2 weeks talking to them. I wasn't offline for more than 24 hours. And so as I continued to disclose to them what I've done, that's when they said, hey, you might want to learn to make some other friends, go outside, see the sun, meet someone else online, which led to me meeting Amber, her mother, and Laura, her aunt. It was right in May of 2001. And so, we're having this conversation. They're like, hey, at the end of this 2 weeks, they're like, we'll buy you computer equipment. What do you think you need spending wise? And I said, I was joking. I said, I don't know, probably about 10 grand. Well, sure enough, they hand me 10 grand in cash.
Okay.
I sign off as a John Doe on the money.
Okay. So, hey, question for you there. What was your, you signed off as John Doe, but you didn't really sign off as John Doe. You had an informant name, right?
No.
Like my informant name was Peter Parker.
Oh, that's cool. No.
That's so cool.
I literally.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So anytime that I had to sign off, so anytime I got caught, Secret Service hires me as an informant, and any type of money that was given to me, you wouldn't sign Brett Johnson to it. You'd sign Peter Parker. Is what would happen. So you just signed John Doe and that was it?
So I was actually, the very first time I started to sign off, they told me to not use my real name. Right. And I started to write Hackah Jak, and they stopped me. They said, no, why don't you use something generic like John Doe? Because you're going to be hacking a lot of, because we already determined like what my scope was, what I'm going to be doing. And they said, should, anyone be, local, military, anyone go, well, let's cross-reference, Hackah Jak with the real hacker name. So don't use that.
Right.
And it boiled down to, one of the guys goes, just write John Doe. And I go, okay. So I use John Doe is what I signed off on every time.
What happens is that list of all the informants, that list is actually housed both physically and on servers. Physically, it's housed in DC. And then I'm not sure where the servers are that specific list is. But that's a high priority, really secretive list. All right. Yeah, it's one of these things. It's one of these things where, like with my case, some of the people that were arrested with my case, it was so secretive that when it came up in court proceedings on some of the individuals that I was associated with, that the Secret Service, it became a closed door meeting, so that none of that stuff was ever discussed publicly at that point in time. Typically what happens is, and I'd like these days, what happens is you get an informant. And even with the Secret Service with me back 2005, what happened is Secret Service arrests you. You agree to be a confidential informant for them. At that point, the Secret Service agents have a meeting with the whatever the prosecutor is in that specific district, and they outline with the prosecutor exactly what type of criminal activities that informant is going to be committing. At that point in time, the prosecutor sits down and says, okay, let's go through this bullshit. This is what I'm willing to allow. And he outlines everything. This specific informant's allowed to do this, and that is your authorization for criminal activity for that 6-month span of time. At that point in time, at the end of the 6 months, you re-up again and you go through again what this specific informant's going to do. If that specific informant goes outside of the boundaries of that authorization, that specific informant can be charged with anything that happens outside of that. So and I know that back then that the Secret Service was far different. My God, far different than the way the FBI operated back in those days. Secret Service, for example, if you were doing something, you had an agent with eyes on the entire time. Or they were supposed to have eyes on. They were in the room with you anyway. At the same time, the computer was logged with something like Camtasia, Spectre Pro, something like that. And I had an associate of mine, David Thomas, that was an informant for the FBI, and the FBI played pretty loose with those rules. David had he was allowed to use computers at his apartment that evidently did not have any type of logging materials on them or anything else like that, and he just had to check in with his agents, his handlers, every now and then. So
that's exactly how I was.
Okay, so what I'm wondering with you is, did you have an authorization for illegal activity, or was and the reason I ask about the Patriot Act, because I know things changed with the Patriot Act. They definitely played fast and loose after the Patriot Act came into play. But prior to the Patriot Act, did you have an authorization for illegal activity, and was that followed by?
So I think it was you and I were talking the other day, you were asking about that. And I learned like, I didn't know that that's how the Secret Service operated. I mean, when we did our agreement, my lawyer, Ransom Hudson, kept all the paperwork from that. I remember sitting down with Bob Balin, which was the federal prosecutor local to us, Benny, some other people, Ransom Hudson, and we determined that, here's the scope of what I can engage in. And I should engage in, because that's what they're going to pay me on.
Right.
But they literally said, go about your hacker life as you normally would, and give us updates. When you're let's say you're going to hack something that's outside the scope, because it would be nights, weekends, whatever, not office hours.
Right.
Engage as you normally would. Immediately file a report with us to let us know where you intrude, you crossed into. If it's a company, if it's a foreign country, you let us know immediately so we can reach out to them and remedy it without problem.
Okay. And that makes sense. Mm-hmm. All right. So you had pretty much continue to act like you act when you find a system that has a vulnerability, notify us ASAP so we can make sure that nothing goes haywire for you.
Right, exactly. So, and it wasn't like, hey, don't hack it, don't deface it. Because, people in the community would reach out to me, and like the Bank of Wall Street, it was another Hackwiser member that goes, shit, I can't find the logging mechanisms. Can you come in and help?
Okay.
Sure. I drop what I'm doing, I'm right in. A number of hacks was that way. We might be sitting there bullshitting about something in IRC, and then I'm like, yo, check this out. And they look and they're like, holy shit, we were just joking about it. I was like, yeah, I figured I'd tag it. Literally and that was a lot of my style. That was a lot of who I was. So, to keep face in the community, the goal was for me to never deviate from my style, but the real goal is to help find as many government and military systems and help secure them because they realized there was a present and clear danger with their systems at that time.
Okay.
One of our buddies that hung out in IRC with us, he used the name Black Dog. He was a detective for the Office of Inspector General at NASA.
Okay.
And so we openly, like, if someone would be like, yo, we're a Fed, we're like, cool, come hang with us. You know, we protected, all the Hackwiser members worked hard to protect our identities.
Right.
I think I may be the only Hackwiser member that's ever been arrested.
Okay. Okay.
So we worked hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I know of. I'm the only one. Now there was some people in that hung with us that I knew for a fact that were snitches. We let NASA OIG detective hang with us. I mean, it was open door to our main chat room where all of us hung out.
All right. So going to work for the FBI, you're given the parameters of finding open systems, priority on government agencies, military.
Mm-hmm.
The group that you're part of, Hackwiser, was there ever any interest on the FBI's part of trying to identify who the other Hackwiser members were?
Never.
No.
Well, that was one of my unconditionables is, no one knows my identity. I don't know anyone else's identity.
Okay.
And for that to change, I mean, that would be awkward. And that was one of the awkward moral standpoints that I did have, is that not crossing that boundary. Okay. And so, that actually never came up. I knew of hackers they wanted. They would talk to me like, yo, this person. And I'm like, yeah, what's your point? I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. And that's never going to change.
Okay.
I am not going to
Didn't they do in-person meetups and you bowed out?
Yeah. So Hackwiser members did a meetup at DEF CON 10 in Las Vegas in 2002. And I was the of the Hackwiser members that went to Vegas, I was the only one that didn't show up to the meetup.
We had thought about with Shadow Crew going to DEF CON, and we decided it was a very bad idea.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So and the 8-digit accounts, I'm assuming you had to forfeit those to the federal government.
I did.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That was a rough day of a lot of loss.
Right.
I mean, I've never seen it. I mean, it was numbers on screen, but yeah.
So you're doing this work for the FBI, and then Hamilton County comes into play.
Well, there's a little bit before that.
Okay.
Because that happens in 2003. My life from 2001 through 2003 was literally chaos. It was insane.
Chaos, yeah.
Okay.
Can I
and I'm gonna.
Please don't kill me. Can I use the restroom real quick?
Yes, Bill O'Hanlon
Jr.
Drinking
too much.
It's all
she lays off the bottle now.
I will be right back. I won't be that long back.
Matter of fact, I'm gonna go and I'll start explaining this because it'll be. You just jump back in, but I'm gonna go.
What are you gonna go?
I'm gonna fucking 2001.
All right.
Gosh, 2001. It was so okay.
Are you okay for time, Jesse?
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
I have something at 12:30, but I can bump that if needed. But I don't think we're anywhere near that. I don't know.
Okay.
Don't care. Brett, you are my number one priority.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it.
So, all right. So we're done with that 2-week span of where I'm disclosing everything. I meet Amber and Laura, and I'm on Yahoo Chat meeting them, and I'm just trying to change the course of my social life a little bit.
Right.
So they give me $10,000. I go to Micro Center. I buy tons of new equipment. The one thing that they said I had to have was a DVD burner or CD burner, so that when I write reports and I destroy log files, I can download the log files of how I intruded, save them, burn them to a CD,
Right.
put my report on a CD, and then give them that CD.
Okay. I got you.
So that was the other condition is for anything I do hack, I had to make a report on it.
Right.
And so that's where the CD burner came in, which is interesting. That CD burner's talked about in a news article because I went to Micro Center. They're out of stock on it. And so the one thing they said I had to have. So I let Ransom Hudson know. He contacted them. And in the infinite amazing speed of the federal government, they finally got the DVD burner in they wanted me to use in August.
Okay.
Months later.
Months later, of course.
Months later. I mean, they're quick. So, they delivered to my lawyer's office. Actually, the package delivered to my lawyer's office. I went and picked it up there, went home. And by the way, from that end of that 2 weeks to when the DVD burner was delivered, I never heard from them again. I had no contact whatsoever with them. That was May, so June, July, August, so 3 months. Then after I got the DVD burner, I still didn't hear from them until September. And I'm laying in my bed and I get a phone call and I answer. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm a hacker. I'm up all night. And voice on the other end says, Jesse Tuttle. And I go, what? He goes, are you watching TV? I said, no, I'm in bed. They said that there was a terrorist attack in New York, or they believe it was a terrorist attack. A plane just hit a building. Okay. And they are calling me because in my disclosure of hacked systems was the CCTV system of the World Trade Center.
Okay.
You can come in. Sorry. Give me a second. So he said, we don't have access to it. We need access. And do you still have access? I said, hell if I know. Let me get up and look.
Okay.
And as I'm looking to see if I still have my access, because I installed a back door. So that's when the second plane hit.
Gotcha.
And I was able to gain access because of the back door that was installed. And I then proceeded to give them access to the system. Give me a second.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Take your time.
I've never been able to talk about that.
It's okay.
It's funny. I mentioned in that book, it's Understanding September 11, mentioned in there about some of the stuff I did. But I regained access to the emergency personnel on the ground so that they would have the live camera feeds in the hallways and the staircases.
What was going through your head at that point in time?
That's the day I became a true hacktivist. I became a vigilante.
Okay.
Project China, the idea was kind of seeded by Pantera. And I was on board. I helped start it. I was there as the start of Project China. Sorry.
No, you're fine, man. Take your time. Take your time. It's okay. Take your time.
But what I see there, I mean, I never honestly thought an absolute true horrific situation like that I would ever witness. I never even thought about that. And then seeing the chaos going on in the hallways and the staircases and people literally pushing over each other and trampling them like they're at a concert or something. I don't know. I immediately went to IRC, and I started messaging everyone I know, all the Hackwiser members, World of Hell members, all the independent, non-group related hackers I knew. Some of the first people that jumped on was like Tommy DeVos, Doggy G, if I recall, the Rafa, some of the World of Hell members, the other people, and it's we immediately, so looking inside the World Trade Center system, CCTV, things like that, I seen connections coming from Arab countries, which is what you mentioned alluded to a little bit ago, is hacking Arab countries and things like that.
Right.
We quickly launched a massive attack against basically every Arab nation to start trying pinpointing this. We went through hacking ISPs, internet backbones, everything we could. I mean, it was a full onslaught on September 11th, the morning and afternoon. Within about 12 to 15 hours, we figured out that it was the Al Qaeda cyber army that was inside the system. We figured out, we're pulling the data of where their ISP accounts are terminating and everything. September 12th, I did an interview the very next day, literally stating the exact that this is our mission, this is our goal. I am sourcing every bit of the intelligence that we gather to U.S. counterintelligence officials. I was very transparent about that in that interview.
Right.
And I think that was for GovTech magazine. I don't even think they're around anymore, but it's not that I had any, some of my best friends are Arab. I eat Arab food like every week. It's one of my favorite meals. It's not that I was ever, I was out to take on the Al Qaeda cyber army with whatever it took, with anyone that's willing to pitch in and help. Project China was the start of a concept that was better formulated when it came to the dispatchers.
Sure.
And I learned in about 2012 when I was meeting with some of my former contacts at the FBI, and they're like, hey, are you interested in being a CI again? Are you interested in getting back into hacking? And I was like, man, I got burned. So no, but I learned there something that I've never shared. I don't think it's ever been shared. Their intelligence traces the origin of Anonymous back to the dispatchers in Project China, because those were the first times that it was an ideological movement,
right,
that was non-centralized but with a unified voice.
I got you.
So when I was on stage just 2 weeks ago, I was talking to the guy and he goes, can I make a reference to it? I said, yeah, go ahead. So, what I was told in 2012, 13, right around there is, that the Project China and the dispatchers that I helped lead and start, both of them helped laid the framework for what later became Anonymous within a couple months after my arrest.
Okay.
Back to, we did that through September, in the middle of September. After that, I just went on with things as normal, being a defacer, hacking systems, making my reports, because I actually didn't start until September 11th. I didn't have my DVD burner, had no contact. I continued hacking, a little more hands off. September 11th definitely re-engaged me at a new level. Going in through 2002, continued hacking. At the end of 2002, beginning of 2003, and I think it was maybe January, February. It was colder months, but I met up with my FBI handler and his brand new partner, and said, hey, I have some intelligence. A news reporter, an investigative reporter from Columbus, Ohio, named John Lasker reached out to me, and he's working on an article about vulnerable county 911 and emergency response systems.
Okay.
And the stuff he shared with me when I was on the phone with him was something that I don't think is very public. He had system specs, he had all sorts of stuff that just did not feel right. And when I'm sharing it, they go, yeah, that doesn't feel right either. Go ahead and see where that goes. Go ahead and just do a scan whatever the targets are that you and him are talking about, and let us know, give us an update. In that same meeting, they said, we have another problem though we need to bring to you. We know you are very adamant about not snitching. And I said, yep, that won't change. They said, how do you feel about human trafficking? And I'll go, what? I had no clue what human trafficking was. I lived in a box, I guess.
Sure.
And so they said, there's a guy running a human trafficking ring. He's from Europe. He lives in Cincinnati. They know who he is. They know his online names. They know his online profiles. They know everything. They just have zero evidence they can enter into court. The other problem is they don't know where he's, the big catch is they don't know where he's operating. They have his home address. They use thermal vision binoculars and never have his heat signature there. I go, okay. They said, if we tell you his online screen name and give you his information, do you think you could hack him? And I'm going, fuck, dude. I don't know if I can. I will. That's a guarantee. I promise you I will do whatever it takes to hack him. And because I was mind blown at what they shared. So I go back and I come up with a AOL screen name, guys mostly on AOL, and I go on there posing as a teen girl, and sure enough, within like a day, he messages me and we start chatting back and forth. He sends me some pictures, and I was like, oh wow, that's great, whatever, playing it off. And so then over the course of like a week or two, I warm up to him, totally leading him on. I then start sending him some pictures of me. Pictures never worked. He got them and he's like, oh, I think these are messed up. Well, it was a custom payload malware. So I backdoored his system. Now I have access to his computer. Fun fact, he opened them on the computer where he did his photo shoots and loaded to process the videos and photos and everything. Found out that he bought a vacant apartment building across the street from a school. That's where he did these things. An elementary school. Yes, my daughter's back now.
Sure.
And that was the second worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
So this is Cincy's sugar dad, right?
Yep.
Okay. So again, this is the difference. I guess this is the difference between Secret Service and FBI. I worked out of the Columbia, South Carolina field office doing targeting financial cyber criminals. On that same floor, they had the sexual predators investigation unit for the Secret Service in SLED, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Locked room where these investigations would take place, and they never used confidential informants for those types of investigations. It was always law enforcement because of the content, because of the way the conversations would have to go, just a host of reasons for that. And to be fair, it was a lot like shooting fish in a barrel. You get on an AOL chat session or a Yahoo chat session, and they would come out of the woodwork. These pedophiles would. And the meetings would always, the agent would pretend to be, preteen girl or early teenage girl. And the guy would always send a penis picture over. And at that
Yep.
point, the agent would say, "Well, I'd love to meet," or the predator would want to meet, and the arrangement would be at the local Burger King in Columbia, South Carolina, because hell, Burger King's always known for pedophiles, I guess. But but the guy would show up, and then they would arrest the guy, and depending on what he was doing, it would range anywhere from 5 years up to for manufacturing would be 20, 25 years in prison. At that point in time, it sounds as if again the FBI was playing a little bit looser with those types of investigative techniques in order to approach you, a CI, about that type of investigation.
So their goal was not just him, because he wasn't just producing child porn. He was involved in a human trafficking ring, literally selling off children as slaves. So it wasn't he was not their only target. They wanted to bring down the entire ring. He was from Netherlands, I believe, Holland, whatever. And so there was a whole European ring that went into Eastern Europe and even Africa. And their goal was to bring down the entire network. And I helped infiltrate their systems fully. They used F servers, file servers on IRC to distribute the pictures, and they were paid services. Hacked their IRCF servers, all sorts of stuff. So it was. I mean, for me, it was. I didn't know any better. I mean, you have a lot more experience in the CI program. Like, I know from my experience with the FBI in 2001, 2, and 3. And yeah, it does sound a lot more loose knit.
Right.
I mean, it was a lot less structured, which I have found very interesting when talking to you, is the amount of structure you had. I'm like,
right.
I couldn't have operated as a hacker in that structure and, be able to hit targets and so forth. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's the difference between FBI Secret Service. Maybe it's the decade of difference.
Sure.
I'm not sure, but it is quite interesting, the difference there.
Yeah.
But then again, in moving forward, because that scan I did, Sheriff's Department shows up. I get so hold on. In 2002, and it's just noteworthy because people always ask, well, whatever happened to the DOD? The DOD did come to my parents' house in 2002. That was knock number 2.
Okay.
And I mean, I wasn't there. I mean, my interaction was nothing. My mom was, and it was one of those things where the FBI literally gave her a card. Think of it like that Monopoly get out of jail free card almost. And they knock, and Humvees, it was full on crazy. My mom's like, hold on, goes and gets this card, comes back, and the guy goes, what the hell is this? She goes, just call the number on it. And he goes, hold on. He walks away, calls the number, and because it was on the back of a FBI business card, and comes back and goes, Miss Tuttle, we are so sorry for any inconvenience. Tell your son thank you for the service he does for our nation. We really appreciate that. And that was it. That was the end of knock number 2.
Right.
So then at the end of 2002, beginning of 2003 is when I'm dealing with John Lasker and this Cincy sugar dad idiot. So that's when knock number 3 comes.
Okay.
So knock number 3 is the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, you did the scan, but you gave
Yeah. So I did do the scan on my daughter's to the side here, fact checking me.
She can get back on camera.
Yeah, come on over here.
He loves the spotlight.
I do too.
I'm an egotistical jerk. It comes with the criminal nature, maybe.
It does. I've got that big ego still.
So, knock number. So I do the scan on Hamilton County Sheriff website and the official Hamilton County website, and I find it was like a 3-year-old known vulnerability.
Okay.
And they were pressed. Yeah.
So, and they were ticked off
Yeah.
because I found out like 2 weeks before this, they hired a tech company to come in, audit and patch and secure all their systems, and paid them a huge amount of money to do
A
this.
lot of money.
Right.
And then I find like a 3-year-old known vulnerability to both of these websites. So
Right.
I let the FBI know, and I've heard multiple stories of how the sheriff's department found out. They found out from John Lasker, and then I also heard that they looked at the logs to see which the logs. I have a copy of the logs still. They're printed out in my office. They don't even show anything in court. They couldn't show us where in the logs it showed I intruded.
Yeah, I'd
So I
read
never
in
did.
the yesterday. I read that initially their excuse was they had read the logs, but that subsequent evidence showed they hadn't, and then they finally admitted it was the Lasker email that was sent to them.
Yep. And then later on, I was told that it was because I let the FBI know, and the FBI let them know, and they found
Okay.
it embarrassing. Either way, it's one of the 3 stories. I'll probably never know which one.
Right.
So, you know, in May, they take all my computer equipment, all my 2,600 magazines, all my books, everything. And, you know, book me in, you know, in interrogation later that day. They said, you know, tell us what you've been doing. Just like the FBI. I said, I will tell you, I'm an open book. I'm a hacker, not a liar, unless I'm social engineering you for a reason. Then I will probably lie to your tech department. And so I started telling them about something. I told them about other security holes that I knew of on their systems, which they never admitted to. They did patch, though. I told them my work on the Cincy Sugar Dad case, that I was working with the FBI, which they also already knew.
Right.
And so some of these other factors that I disclosed to them, so, you know, I have 6 charges of unauthorized use of government property coming on me. I then go to the tank. I sit in this big glass tank that was intimidating. I've never done that before. Came up in conversation in there when someone goes, "Yo, what you in for?" And I was like, nothing. And someone else looks over and goes, "I seen that motherfucker on TV. He's the hacker." And someone goes, "What did you hack?" And I go, "Nothing." And another guy peeps up and goes, "I heard it was the sheriff's department." That's when everyone wanted me to make sure that I clear their records when we get out.
Right. Right.
You know, as one suggests. So I then spend, I get my cell. I go to a cell because of the interaction in the tank. I actually was deemed a risk, and so they gave me a cell to myself.
Okay.
And I didn't have to share with anyone, and which was nice. Spent a total of 18 hours in jail. That 18 hours was enough for me to know I never want to deal with that again. I am not designed for that. 18 hours literally was enough to scare me straight. So I get out and I go home and I'm like, screw this, done. I'm lying in the sand, not doing that. Well, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks later, 2-3 weeks later, grand jury indictment, 16 felonies. What? I am shocked. I'm sitting there. Well, hold on. Yeah, it gets there. So I'm sitting there watching this on TV with my brother and cousin. They, you know, like school just ended for them. Right. And, you know, the news reports 16 felony count indictment just handed down on known hacker Jesse Tuttle, blah, blah, blah. 6 of unauthorized use of government property, 10 of possession of pornographic matter involving a minor.
Right.
What in the hell? So, I mean, up to this point, the FBI knew about the 6. They didn't know about the 10 coming. And so that took all of us by surprise. They were just looking like, hey, you know, we'll talk to them. I'm sure we can work this out. They didn't know at the time, and it wasn't discovered for some time, that the county was embarrassed because they just paid all that money for the security. You know, no one knew that they were embarrassed, that, you know, so then starts the legal pissing match between local and federal authorities. So, and I think it was my 2013 end of 2003, 2004, beginning of 2005 literally was a blur.
Right.
Because, I had tickets to go to DEF CON again, paid for by the FBI, to go to DEF CON 11 in 2003. The prosecutors found that on my computer, and I went to the judge and said, Your Honor, we're worried he's a flight risk. We'd like to put him on house arrest, EMU, for the weekend. He can come off on like Tuesday next week. And that house arrest turned into 4 years, 4 months, 28 days. When that 4-year time, my life became a blur. But there's so many other things that happened in that time. So, we were battling the case with a private lawyer, racked up a $250,000 bill with him. He waived it. Right. Phenomenal guy. The lawyer that worked for him is now, what is she, a federal circuit court judge?
She's a judge. Yeah, she's a judge for a federal judge or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but she started out fresh out of law school working for the lawyer that said he'd take my case, and he assigned her to do it. So I was like one of her first cases, apparently. Made great headway. I mean, I was a dumb, early 20-year-old kid. I knew nothing about law at this point. So she sits down, she starts to teach me hey, think about it this way. This is how you look at stuff. At what level is it intent? At what level was it, premeditated? She's teaching me this stuff. And so then she goes, what do you think about this? Because I'm teaching her about computers at the same time. She didn't know much about computers and tech and hacking. So we were teaching each other. And so then it comes up about we try to get discovery. They won't give me discovery because they said that would be like a druggie asking for their cocaine back.
Okay, let's pause here just a second. A couple of questions I need to ask because of the articles that I was reading yesterday from Cincinnati Beat and a few other places as well. The first is, one of the articles said that you had informed the Hamilton County investigators that there was a potential of child-related content on your device. Had you done that or not? Okay.
Yes, I did. So I actually told them in that interrogation.
Okay, so why was that there?
Taking down that human trafficking ring. I never finished that out, unfortunately, because they came, they seized my computer. No one knew, the FBI, no one knew that they were doing this. And so I was in the middle of helping take down that ring, hacking their file servers, hacking their systems literally worldwide. So pulling in the content.
So you were downloading data from their servers or not?
Yeah, I had to establish the proof of, hey, here's the system, here's the file server, here's the data I stole from it, here's, where, this is the conversation I had with them, here's the pictures they sent me, lining up, okay, this is here, this is here. So, yeah.
Okay. The second question I had is one of the articles mentions that one of the investigators calls Bustamante and mentions you to Bustamante, and Bustamante tells that investigator that you are no longer working as a confidential informant to go ahead with the case. True or not?
That's what they said. When I talked to Bustamante and the federal prosecutor, apparently that call never happened.
Okay. And this is what's really interesting with me with this entire case is let's be honest. So Hamilton County, is that Cincinnati?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So Cincinnati's a bunch of fucknuts, evidently, as I'm reading through this case. Is that fair to say?
I think the history of it stands for itself.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's
here.
That's
fair to say. All right. So you've got, and I know that you said not to mention this. I'm going to do it anyway. But you've got a search warrant that was when the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department went to the judge to get the search warrant. They did not inform the judge that you were working as a confidential informant, so the judge gives a search warrant at that point in time. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. The person who executed the search warrant was neither a law enforcement official or an attorney, but just kind of a computer forensics analyst that only had a few computer classes under his belt to begin with, correct?
That's it exactly.
And that
Okay.
was done by a lady that had reached out to you. That
Leslie Blade. So
Yes.
she was an investigative journalist that discovered all that and used Freedom of Information Request Acts to pull all that information.
Okay.
That's how we ever found out. That
Right,
was in,
because
like,
the sheriff's office
years
lies
later.
about it for months until
Years.
that information is years until that
Years.
information comes out that, hey, this guy wasn't even a law enforcement official.
Yep.
And just so the listeners know what's going on there, if you come in and incorrectly execute a search warrant, the evidence that's gathered in that search warrant, it's very easy to get that evidence disqualified. Very easy to do that. As a matter of fact, on my escape, what happens is U.S. Marshals come in the hotel room that I was housed up in. I had all kinds of evidence. I had stolen identities, prepaid debit cards, laptop with boatloads of evidence on there. They seized it improperly, and as a result of that, they could not use any of that to give me further charges other than the escape charge at that point in time. So it's very easy. You have to do things by protocol in order to prosecute the case correctly. So Hamilton had screwed up magnificently on this case, and they lied about it after that. So, I mean, they had their asses, you had them over a barrel on several different matters, right?
I did. So thus the problems that pursued. So, in one of the articles, the judge even questions if it was even pornography. Then at another time, the judge, and they were trying to put the anklet on me for house arrest. He literally says, I have no proof whatsoever that Mr. Tuttle has done anything wrong. That was in a news article.
I read that as well.
But to appease the prosecutor, we'll put him on for the weekend because he's already said he's not going to DEF CON. He's not headed there, but he's willing to do this just to appease the prosecutor.
So my understanding is a total of 9 pictures, only one of which was shown in court. The judge was shown a picture of what appears to be a minor, 12 years old, taking a shower. And at that point, the judge asked, is this even pornography? The head investigator could not identify or define what pornography was, said they didn't even know.
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah.
This is actually a little bit of a sobering moment for me because as I've started to talk about my background and my history of hacking, I've actually never shared a lot of this. So,
Which this is the part that actually you asked me a question earlier of like, how were you feeling? And the
Right.
part that made me the most angry is the part that we are now starting to talk about.
Okay.
Is the whole process post hacking. So, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
I mean, and so, she wasn't born at this time. I was 2 years dating her mom at that point. We weren't engaged or anything. And Amber, highly analytical. I mean, she's the girl that was like, yeah, I'll tell on if someone's doing something illegal. That needs to be. I mean, this girl, and I didn't know this at the time. When I went on house arrest, when I started this, she's seen that I was being railroaded. And her dad and her family pulled her aside and said,
We
look,
just figured this out.
well, no, you just learned some of this the other day. She showed me this years later. She sat down and wrote a letter to herself and to remind herself during the hard times that Jesse's innocent, Jesse's a good guy, and wrote out this entire page letter to herself and then promised that until this is over, she will stay with me and she'll be my support.
Right. So I mean that's speaking highly.
That is,
You know.
that was the first step of me getting through it. So,
Right.
so her support there, I mean, it was silly because when we left the courtroom that day, something occurred to me when I was going over to get my anklet. And they were putting, I'm leaving the courtroom. I'm going to go get my anklet be put on. And it occurred to me, I'm like, I have a feeling this is going to be longer than 5 days or whatever, 6, 7 days. I just had that weird feeling. So Amber and I are talking in the car. After I get my anklet on, I'm like, fidgeting with it. I'm like, this sucks. Like, so we stop and buy a big screen TV and a PlayStation.
Of course you do.
Of course, as one does when they're going to be in their house.
That's right.
And thus started my professional gaming career, which was rather lucrative because I had to find a way to make money. But I mean, I knew that at that point, that when Tuesday comes next week, I just had this bad feeling. Well, Tuesday come, and the prosecutor continues it. So then it gets set out for like a month, and I'm like, I knew this was coming.
Right.
So then we're doing demands for discovery. They keep saying they can't give us discovery because it'd be like returning drugs to a drug addict.
Sure.
They said I was delusional that the FBI had no contact with me, never worked with me, didn't know who I was, like literally suggested I needed mental help and therapy. It's interesting because we'll get to another point later. So somewhere around this time that they're making these suggestions is when the FBI and, after they made these suggestions, the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office comes into the courtroom and proceeds to have basically a yelling match in the judge's chambers. And then the county prosecutor, wasn't my prosecutor, but his boss, the county prosecutor, basically kicked him out and said, this is a local jurisdiction dispute and problem. You don't have jurisdiction here. I cordially invite you to leave.
Okay.
That's a very Disney way of what happened.
Right.
They apologized to me on the way out. And that was basically the end of their interaction. At that point, I knew I was definitely screwed. So we continue to ask for years, we filed discovery demands. And for years, they would say no. And then we would have to request a continuance.
Right.
So every continuance was on me, which doesn't look good in my favor. It looks like I'm just buying time, but we literally couldn't move forward without the discovery, which they wouldn't give us because the one image they did produce, the judge sat there and questioned was like, is this even porn? Like, I mean, it wasn't what they were claiming it was, but it did identify a local girl that was missing that I retrieved from their systems. And so, moving forward, now I get to like the summer of 2004, a year in, and a year on house arrest, that was rough. A lot of gaming done, a lot of fun times online, but they never said I couldn't have a computer. They never said I couldn't use internet.
Okay.
Like they never put any of those demands in place. But you're inside my house with limited out hours. I was permitted up to 8 hours a week. I had to get them pre-approved, pre-scheduled, tell them where I'm going, what I'm doing. And so I'd have to schedule that out like 2 weeks ahead. So then, I was hitting a really dark spot in the summer of 2024, about a year on, and, or 2004. And, I had tamed a gun. I realized that, I wanted to literally kill myself at that point. I was done. And so, it was hard. Very dark time in my life. And then, find out that my girlfriend's pregnant. And
with young Reese here.
That'd be me.
And I knew I was not going to be one of those fathers that, just up and bail or, and I always wanted to be a dad. I always wanted to instill the whole thought process of like, the passion to learn, the passion to explore, what was instilled in me. And so I got super excited about this. It literally gave me my second wind. So come, through 2004, early 2005, she's born. I get to be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
House arrest had to be.
Of course.
As one on house arrest does. She was my best friend for like 3 years.
Okay.
The relationship between Amber and I got really bad because, it's taking a toll on her emotionally.
Sure.
By 2007, there's an article that comes out in the summer, and it was like June, July, August, somewhere, I think it was August 2007, talks about Hamilton County person sets record of 4 years on house arrest. The longest house arrest in our area was 1 year before that.
Okay.
And the prosecutor was interviewed. My parents and Amber was interviewed. I was interviewed. They came out, Matt Reese, like all this stuff.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So read the news article. Read it one. It was like printed at 30 different places. And so, I'm on here now 4-year mark, and mine and Amber's relationship's getting rocky because, she vowed to, and I didn't know at this time, she vowed to stay with me no matter what. The only thing that was keeping her there was her daughter and her vow. And it was even coming down to maybe I just take our daughter and go, or, whatever. She was wearing thin.
Right.
I can't blame.
You can understand that type of emotional and psychological toll.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't even imagine what she was going through because she wasn't the one that was basically being put on trial. By the way, it came out that back in 2003, here's something
a little bit more.
Here's something crazy is in 2003, right up the road from where I live, a guy jumps out of the bushes and knifes a 12-year-old girl to death. Me and him are in the newspaper at the same time on the same page, and it says I'm facing 86 years prison. He's facing 20.
Yeah.
So now fast forward to 2007, there's an article that comes out because they're interviewing everyone. Prosecutors finally admit, it felt good when I see this, is that the prosecutors finally admit, not only did I have connections with the FBI, they acknowledge I was working for the FBI.
Right.
They admit it 4 years later. All those times they called me delusional, suggested I needed mental help, slandered me. Now they're admitting they knew I was working for the FBI.
So how long after that admission was this case disposed of?
About 6 months later, because they still wouldn't drop it.
Right.
They still wouldn't do anything, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And so it was coming up like end of 2007, October, November. And then I finally did a plea bargain.
And there's a reason for that too.
Yeah, but.
Well, I know, but it was.
It's. Could you imagine having a 2.5-year-old little girl that you never seen go to the park?
Right.
You can't take to the park. You can't do anything. And there's what she's alluding to was there's a law that came January 1st, 2008 that said if you're being charged with these crimes, you can't have a minor live with you. So it was a two-factor part. That because at that time my current charges fell within that.
Right.
And so I'm going January 1st, I may lose my little girl to the system. And that was a real awakening moment for me that I go, what if I literally get to sit at home. I spend time with my daughter. Before she was 2, I didn't believe that she should ever even watch TV. She would watch me game, but there's no other TV We sat and looked at books. We talked. We'd look out the window at stars. I would show her books about, I mean, no TV, but like books about outer space and like there's the moon and constant. I mean, all this stuff. That's her entire childhood for the first 2.5 years of her life. So that's when, those two factors prompted me that, you know what, I'm going to take the fail here. I'm going to take the plea bargain. I wanted to plead no contest. They told me that they won't proceed forward with requesting the judge to amend the charges and everything else. So, and to accept my plea and their recommendation of no jail time, no nothing, just 3 years reporting probation. And, it's interesting because that same article that talks about me being on 4 years of house arrest talked about how, but if it goes to, we wanted to go to trial. The prosecutor said, we wanted to go to trial because we still believe he's a present and clear danger around children.
Right.
They never said I couldn't be around children. I had a 2.5-year-old daughter.
Right.
They never said I couldn't use computers. They never said I couldn't use phones. They never said I couldn't be on the internet because I was gaming. I was, so all of this stuff in that like 6-month period just compounded. Things, some of the research Leslie Blade was pulling, the investigative reporter.
Wow. What a lady.
She was a champ. Yeah. She's the one that wrote the City Beat ones in like 2005 and 6. Mine and her relationship got rocky because she wanted me to fight this and because of what you shared. And I'm going, I don't have the money. I'm on a public defender that he's a nice guy, but he's not the Babe Ruth you would hope. Like he's not the go-getter. Yeah, he's not a shark. He's checking a box for me. And so I'm like, I don't have the funds to do this. I don't have the means to do it. And so she got really upset with me for not pursuing all of the research she's done. She did even much more research than what was ever disclosed in City Beat. Far beyond that. That's insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, wrapping up through this time, I finally come off EMU. That was an interesting day. So I go in court. I did the plea, and then right after Christmas, I think it was like December 27th or something, the judge said he'll come in to do the sentencing. So I go in for sentencing, and that's when I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to get 3 years reporting probation, random drug testing, and that's it. That was done. I mean, they dropped everything else. So I go in for that. I go over to get my anklet cut off. They hand me the pair of scissors, and they're literally like the whole department there. I cut it off. They had a cake for me. Like I made friends with them. I had a wonderful time. Actually, my very first EMU officer, he would come for random checks on our house. And he was an older guy. He would sit and watch Golden Girls with me on TV. He loved the show. I just found like what they enjoyed, and I would try and cater to that because I knew I was heading this for a long haul. I'm going to try and make friends with these guys.
Right. What I wanted to ask is, going through all that, and I'm going to ask Reese the same thing.
Yeah.
But going through everything, how do you rebuild your life after that? I mean, 4 years of house arrest. You've got all these news articles. You're on the same news page as somebody who stabbed a child. How do you rebuild your life after that?
Yeah, that took a lot of planning, actually. So, the next 3 years, I focused on bettering myself from basically January 1st, 2008 through December 31st, 2010. Because that's the time I was on reporting probation. And I literally did nothing but focus on spending time with my daughter, spending time with my now wife. We ended up getting married in that time I was on probation. And then focusing on bettering my relationship with my family and focusing on myself. I had a lot of work to do on myself because I remember when someone at the courthouse told me, you know what? Your life's basically over. You're going to be a burden to your family. Might as well kill yourself. You're done, dude. These charges, you're going to get convicted. This was early on. You're going to be convicted. And it just, that set that seed and nugget in my head that I really am. I'm a burden. So I spent 3 years bettering everything. Coming out of that, because we were with an Amway group, did fairly decent. I started building a team with a lot of customer sales, started feeling good. Well, someone on one of the other Amway teams knew I had a background in computers, had a computer problem, was like, hey, could you take a look? And I'm like, ooh, haven't touched that in like a decade almost. But yeah, let me take a look. And I was able to help them with their website problem. And so then I started doing a little consulting and bridging the waters a little bit. But mostly I was building an Amway team, customer sales. Amber was a graphics tech. You know, I was still the stay-at-home dad for Reese until 2013. 2013, everything changed.
Okay.
So Amber goes through a workforce reduction. They want to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a big guy. I'm not designed for desert. I'm designed for beaches. I'm not designed for desert. I'm like, that's
also,
a no-go.
All of our family is in this state or Kentucky, Corbin, Kentucky.
Okay.
So we would be also moving literally across the
My
US.
entire family, her entire family,
Yeah.
everything. So
Right.
it was a no-go. And so when she went on unemployment and started looking around, she had a degree in graphics design from an art school, but she had no certification. She got a job, got really lucky. Good job. And so now, you know, she's like, oh, I got to get Adobe certifications. I got to do some of that. And while she starts to look into this, one of our friends mentions geocaching to us. It's something that we've known about for years. And we're like, someday we'll probably go geocaching. It's like worldwide scavenger hunting with smartphone and GPS.
Right. Reese, could you talk quickly about how all this has affected you over the span of this arc of years?
Yeah. Well, I do know my way around tech quite well. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I'm still learning a ton. Like I have 5 degrees right now, coming on 6. And I get into the office and I learn so much new stuff every single day.
She started college at 13 because she wanted, so in 8th grade, I said, I have a responsibility to you.
This is crazy.
So a little bit about her backstory that actually leads up to me coming out. You know, I said, I have a responsibility to you that you have a skill set in life that you can make money with. The only thing I can promise I can teach you is computers and tech.
So that's what you're going to know.
So you will know that if you like it or not.
Yep.
So she goes,
and he said this isn't even what you have to go into, but if all else fails, you at least know this.
So real short version of the story, we end up getting her enrolled into a dual.
There's a thing called CCP or dual enrollment. It's doing college classes while you're in high school. And so I tested the waters on that in, I want to say the summer of 2019.
It was the spring because you were at the end of 8th grade.
It was the end of 8th grade. And so I started doing some of those classes and realized that I really liked it. And it was also easier than most of my high school classes, which was kind of funny because high school's just chaos. At least in college, they give you a syllabus of typically everything you're going to be doing.
Right.
And so, I mean, we just started grinding that out. And then my freshman year, we got this giant whiteboard and we were like, what's the end goal? What are we trying to do? And so we literally planned out the fall, spring, and summer of every single year, all 4 years of my high school. And the end goal was to have an associate degree because we realized
one associate in computer programming and database management.
Okay.
And so it's because, you can get you can do the college classes for high school and college credit, and you also get AP credit.
Right.
So it's like you're killing like 3 birds with one stone. And so it just made sense. Well, little did I realize that because I knew I wasn't going to go into English or social studies or anything like that. And I wanted to be able to take as many like art classes my senior year as possible. So instead of doing them at Indian Hill, I just did tons of English and social studies classes at CCP, But what I didn't realize is that because I was doing so many side classes to avoid doing them in high school, I also simultaneously was checking off classes needed for other degrees too. So it got to like the time that I was about to get my associate degree, and my advisor and my dad and I started looking at it, and she's like, you realize if you take like 2 more classes, you also pick this one up?
Get another degree.
And I'm like,
She has so much done.
She goes, and then 2 classes from this degree also overlap with this one. So if you do the 2 classes for this one, you can also get this one. And so I got 4. I ended up getting 4.
She graduated. So when she left high school, she had a Bachelor of Computer Science with honors, an Applied Associate of Computer Programming and Database Management, an Applied Associate in Software Engineering, an Applied Associate of Information Systems, and an Associate of Science with honors, and Certified Encryption Specialist through EC Council, all before she got her high school diploma.
So
I was a college dropout.
The lesson to learn here is that I should have been drinking almond milk the entire time.
It's okay, I swear. I mean, it is pretty good, but okay.
It's
so
pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean, not the
good.
almond juice, but what you've done is pretty good.
She's finishing up her 6th degree right now in software development or something at UC.
Something.
It's her 6th.
But,
Okay.
I mean,
She's building a honeypot.
So back to your question, because if you can't tell, I love to hear myself talk, right? So
I do too.
Yeah, and he does too. So it's like bad.
We're basically screwed on this podcast.
Yeah, but I mean, growing up, my childhood was amazing. I loved my childhood, honestly. And here's the thing, because so much of this stuff happened with him when I was so young, a lot of it is a blur. I remember like going into the offices for when he had to go and do what was it?
My probation reporting.
His probation reporting and stuff like that. I remember walking through the hallways, but it was like such a blur because I was so young.
She didn't know what I was there for.
I had no idea.
I never explained it at that point.
And I actually didn't even really know that he was into computers or anything, because my entire childhood was revolved around like building my brain up and my imagination up as much as possible, and not really everything else going on. Like, I want to say like personally, like family wise, if that makes sense. And so I didn't really start becoming fully aware of a lot of what was going on until I actually want to say middle of elementary school, when I asked about it.
Okay. It was like 3rd grade-ish.
And actually what's really interesting is that when I was younger, they actually wanted to put me on an IEP. Is that what they're called? Individual
Education Program.
Because
for special education students.
Right. Yeah, because I actually did horrible in school, all the way until high school, because my attention is very minimal. Especially when I was younger, I was like a ricochet rabbit. I was from here to here to here to here. A lot like how I don't want to say you are, but a lot like how he is. And he thinks about things in very different manner, if that makes sense. Right. So that's how I thought of things. And so like the state testing, I could never sit down and take a test. I would get on there and be like, okay, take it. And then I would probably bomb it. And so there was a lot of things that I just didn't do very well, but I wasn't dumb. I was a very smart child. I just didn't do the best in school or a lot of other things. And I also was socially, I don't want to say awkward, I just didn't understand other people. So a lot of my childhood was also with myself, my family, or I
had no one to socialize with. Yeah. I mean, a lot of parents get together with other parents, and she's never had when she went through school, we never had one of her friends over.
Because I didn't.
I mean, and I always looked at it this way, and I would tell Reese, she's like, well, can I have a sleepover? Yeah, you can go to your friend's house, because could you imagine, someone coming over, staying the night, and then their parents looking up and going, oh, that guy's convicted of that?
Right.
And actually,
So my daughter had a very stunted social life.
Still to this day, I don't think I've ever had a sleepover at our house before. And it's for that same reason.
Okay.
And so my social life was really odd, but I was very nice. I was very bubbly when I was a child because I was very like, nothing is bad. I was brought up, this is going to sound crazy. I was brought up being taught to talk to strangers because the only way you're going to have opportunity in life is if you go talk to people. Like people that you don't know. Yeah. Now, obviously be safe with it. He enrolled me into martial arts for a reason.
And she got her black belt in mixed martial arts.
All right.
You know, but you know, when I was a teenager, I remember when I told my mom that I'm like, I signed up for BMG music service or something, and I had to cancel it, and I had to call them, and I was nervous about this because I never spoke on the phone. BMG music, Columbia.
I signed up for BMG music service too, under probably 30 different names. I had one hell of a cassette collection.
I bet. So I had to call them, and I was nervous about it. And my mom said, you know what? We're going to fix this. You're going to make every phone call from now on. I'm like, so she sat there while I did that. And then she goes, actually, you're going to call Cincinnati Bell and and do something, because she was getting ready to use the phone, but we only had one phone line plus the one for the computer. So, and she goes, you're going to call Cincinnati Bell as me. Huh? She made me start making every phone call and convincing whoever on the other end that I was her and how to social engineer my way through all those interactions, which as a hacker really served me later. So my mom did that. Well, when we were in Amway, they talked about, you know, one of the problems is everyone's told don't talk to strangers. And I was like, man, that is a problem if you're trying to build a social life. So based on my interaction from my mom and what we learned in Amway, I'm like, there's never a stranger. Yeah. It's just someone you haven't met yet. And that's how she was raised.
So I was raised. And so I was really bubbly. But because of that, when I was at school and also around people in general, I was really, really bad at becoming friends with maybe not my wisest.
The lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
That might not be socially accepted by others.
Right. And so a lot of my elementary, middle school, and early high school life was a battle between, I found myself getting really distracted by my social life because I've spent so much time trying to fix it.
Sure.
Because I went to a really small school. A lot of people it's very cliquey. Yeah. Very cliquey. So
good kids, but very
great
cliquey.
Kids. Right. Honestly, great community, just very cliquey. And nobody, there's no bullying in where I went to school. There was never a fight. There was nothing like that. It was just very passive aggressiveness and things like that. And as I got older and I realized that, you know, everybody else is, they have their ideologies, they have their own thoughts. And because of the community of which, so my peers were brought up in, they knew how to understand people to a certain extent, but a lot of children I was around were more judgmental. And so when I would come up to them, and because of the way that I was raised, it's less of a clear-cut way. It was very holistic, I want to say. Right. My views on things didn't typically align with a lot of my peers. And so growing up, I didn't really have a lot of close friends. And if they were close, they probably weren't the best of associates to be involved with. And so what's funny is that he says he's my best friend, but for the longest time, indirectly, he was also my best friend because I didn't really have... Who else did I talk
Terrorist fist bump.
Giving a fist bump. Look, do you see how bad that was?
Look, I know you guys have got to go, and I can't tell you the pleasure that I have had talking to both of you today, truly.
Can I share one thing real quick?
Absolutely.
So, you know, about our awkwardness, when we went up, she goes,
awkwardness?
Yeah, it's a good. We went up when I said, look, I will teach you at least one skill. She goes, what's the best school? And I said, MIT for tech. She goes, can we go visit it? So we went up to Boston. We walked through Harvard. We went to MIT.
Oh my
And
gosh.
for the first time ever, she goes, Dad, these are my people.
Yeah. I found people I finally clicked
So
with.
then, like 8-9 months later, I enroll her into her first hackathon. It's a software coding competition, typically 24 hours, start to finish. And she goes, no, I'm not going. No. I said, you are going. And like, it's a yelling match. I mean, it was vicious.
it was a little crazy.
I mean, some arm locks later. I'm begging and tapping out, but I'm driving. So, we get there and she goes, you are going in with me. You are not ditching me. Promise me you won't ditch me.
Let me just clarify. 8th grade me, 7th, 8th, 9th grade me, and early 10th grade me was crazy. I was so different, especially freshman year me. He likes to make a joke that the only time I rebelled was for like 3 weeks in freshman year.
Those are rebellious teenage years.
And that is what happened.
That is what happened.
It was around this time.
It was around the same time of me rebelling. And
so at this hackathon, like within 30 minutes, she comes over to me. She goes, Dad, can I stay here? I found my people again.
I found them again.
You can leave. Actually, why don't you leave? She goes,
well,
and
what's
I
crazy
said,
is
well,
I
you
had
have
homecoming that
tonight.
night. I had homecoming that night and a lacrosse game the following morning. I was like, well, here's the plan. So basically, I'm going to sit here and then you're going to bring my stuff. And then it was this whole thing.
So
It's a
she
good
works
plan.
out. Yeah. So now, she starts her computer club through school. She's doing hackathons. She does all this stuff through school. And she's finishing school last spring with all these degrees, all this stuff. She's taken all this advice I've given her totally blind. And she goes, so she's also working an enrollment coach at Harvard to do a master's in computer science at Harvard. Mm-hmm. And so she's spending a year between, she's planning to go to Harvard this fall. And I go, so what are you going to do now that you're out of high school? She goes, I'm going to finish up my 6th degree because I only have 4 classes. And I want to start a data compliance company. Okay. All of my capstones I've been working on for my college degrees are all like phishing simulation, cybersecurity training, document data handling, all these things for data compliance that what the industry needs because the new FTC safeguards and all these state regulations coming. And I go, well, that's a cool idea. How, let me know if you need help.
Yeah, this alludes
That's where I screwed up.
This alludes to
so she goes,
now.
I'm glad you mentioned that because
the whole thing was I don't want to talk about it while you're in school because I don't want your peers to find out about it. I had now graduated, and because of how passionate I was about him getting everything, like him talking about it, him getting it leveled
squared
out,
away.
like everything figured out. I was like, I'm now graduated. The one thing you can do to help me, well, there's actually 2. Number 1, help be a guide on this company. Well, did I go number 2 first?
You went be the guide first.
I usually number 2 first.
Yeah. So when she starts I want you to be an advisor. She goes, because I have the good guy mindset. I know what school teaches. They don't teach how you think. I know because I've grown up with you. You have that bad guy mindset.
Right.
I want you to be my partner because I can bring the good guy mindset that understands how the bad guy works. You just straight bring the bad guy to it. You know how that brain works. Yeah. And I want to co-build this with you. That was condition. That was the first thing she wanted.
Number 1.
The second thing scared the daylights out of me.
Yeah, and
that's what we're doing right now.
I said I want you to start talking about your past. I need you to get that figured out.
Yeah, you got to get that shit figured out, Jesse.
And you know what? I actually
agree with
put that off. I put that off until beginning of October last year. I actually heard your the Brett Johnson show episode 1, and you talked about how because I'm helping my daughter build this company, and I hear you talk about all these IT tech people, security experts that know how the hacker thinks or the criminal thinks is all bullshit. And I'm sitting there, and I'm in a Skyline Chili parking lot eating, and I go, holy crap, he's right. Yeah. This dude is right.
Wow.
Dude's right.
And I call Reese. She's hanging out. I said, I'm ready to talk. I'm headed over to a bonfire at my cousin's house, but you know what? I'm gonna be an open book.
Yeah, I was at my friend's house and he called me. He's like, I'm ready to do this, and I was like, well, let's figure that out. So that's
So
also
because
kinda
of
what
you, it's
brings us
come
to
full
here.
circle. Thank you.
Well, I like that. I like the full circle by, yeah. Well, hey, if compliance company, if anyone wants to reach out to either you, Reese, or Jesse, how do they contact you?
Hit her up or hit me up on LinkedIn is the best.
Oh, LinkedIn.
I mean, because
LinkedIn.
we've had a lot of people ask about consulting, compliance, everything. Hit us up on LinkedIn. And she has a number of different companies and platforms coming
All right.
for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I know she's impressive as hell. I'm sitting there going, shit, I should have been on almond juice for years.
Almond juice is where it's at.
Almond juice is obviously where it is.
Yeah.
I should have taken that guy up on that case at that
Oh, yeah.
halfway house, but no, idiot Brett just couldn't stand the taste of it. Little did I know.
Oh yeah.
All right, so Jesse and Reese Tuttle, you both are absolutely outstanding. Anyone who wants to reach out, Jesse is doing speaking, they're doing compliance training as well. Please find them on LinkedIn. You cannot miss out on this. They're absolutely great human beings. I have absolutely loved this conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you. We
it's
really
been
appreciate
fantastic.
you and your entire team behind the scenes.
No,
And we've had a
absolutely.
good
You
time
guys-
talking with.
All right, if you guys need anything, please reach out to me. Let me know. All right.
Yep,
Definitely.
for sure.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Stay safe out there. All right. So that was Jesse and Reese Tuttle. And just full disclosure here, I've gotten much better about researching the guests who are coming on, about pulling up articles, reading their history, making sure that that the stories are correct, everything else like that. With Jesse, I initially I had a lot of questions, and you saw a lot of those questions coming out in the interview. One of the main questions I had, of course, was having to do with the underage content that was found on his machines. And I spent a lot of time yesterday reading case files, reading the newspaper reports. It appears exactly as Jesse says that the FBI did ask him to look at this Cincy sugar dad character. So as far as the main story goes, I believe the man 100%. I do think that he was embellishing on a couple of areas. The areas that I think that he was embellishing on, I don't really believe the 8-digit bank account. All right, I think that's a bit of embellishment. The reason I think that is because, as he admitted several times, he grew up in a household that didn't really have any money. Once you get money like that, believe you me, you spend the shit as quickly as possible and as extravagantly as possible. So I don't really buy that that he had an 8-digit account. I just think that's a bit of embellishment, not a big deal. The other thing that I think is a bit of embellishment, he talks about how the FBI did not want him to identify some of the Hackwiser stuff, and that was a no-go for him. That's not really the way that works. I have seen. I'm very fortunate that I get to work with law enforcement. I have a lot of law enforcement contacts. I have seen newbie agents that have been ran over by confidential informants, that those informants kind of dictate things like that. Bustamante was not a newbie agent. He knew how to handle confidential informants. They obviously had Jesse with a lot of evidence against him when they went with that warrant. So I can understand the embellishment or being a bit disingenuous about saying I, did not tell on anybody. But as I've said before, and I will say it again, everyone talks, period. And especially computer guys, because, a lot of us, I'm a little bit different, and even I talked. I'm a little bit different than that I grew up in a criminal family background. But you take a lot of these computer guys that really had not really committed any crime at all except online, they run off at the mouth a lot. All right. So I don't really buy that. Now, that being said, I'm not trying to pick. I like the hell out of Reese. I think she is outstanding. Jesse, I enjoyed Jesse. I think that what we're dealing with here is a story of a county or a local government that really had a hard-on for this guy and really went through a lot of investigative procedures that were absolutely off the rails, incorrect. I was reading the case files yesterday again. There was poor training, poor execution, poor investigative techniques. I mean, it was really like the Cincinnati cops, the Hamilton County cops, were Keystone cops at the end of the day. And I can say that because I'm the guy that says this shit. They were all suffering from fucking idiot syndrome. And at the same time, the FBI, I don't think that they did everything that they possibly could. And here's the thing, I'm a huge fan of the FBI, huge. But I don't think that they did everything they could at that particular time to protect their asset. Had they cut Jesse loose? I don't know. But I do know that from all appearances, and I even spoke to some law enforcement officials about this case, from all appearances, he absolutely was, and they later admitted he was an FBI asset. They did not appear to protect him the way that they should have. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Criminal Thoughts Podcast, and this has been a marathon of a podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, take the time out to hit that subscribe button. If there's something you didn't like about it, leave a comment in the comment section. Send me an email, brett@thebrettjohnsonshow.com. Check out The Brett Johnson Show as well. The Brett Johnson Show is basically becoming, chicken soup for the soul. How do you become a better person? How do I become a better man than that creature that I used to be when I committed crime? We're going to close this out. And how do we close it out? We close it out the exact same way every single time. Stay safe, stay secure, stay vigilant. More importantly, at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I cannot stress that enough. Just do the right damn thing. If you do that, everything else falls into place. My name is Brett Johnson. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.